Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond, Green Chambers in London, and today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Bloomsbury Professional Law. It's an important book and one that I think is probably really more designed for professionals and people with a fairly good knowledge of this particular area of law. It's called Fraud and Breach of Warranty. Obviously we're looking at contracts in particular, but the issue of fraud, of course, is always a very difficult one for litigators. It's been written by three people: Simon Salzedo, Queen's Counsel, Andrew McIntyre and Sophie Shaw. Elizabeth was the lead writer on this review, and this is the title that we've considered appropriate for it: Cutting Through the Confusion of Fraud and Breach of Warranty, a valuable new digest on a tricky area of law. And that's exactly what this area of law is, as any law student will know, and I certainly do, having been a law student and of course having taught this subject and of course practiced in this area, because there are a lot of additional things which come with any allegations of fraud, which of course those litigating need to be aware of. Let's look at the book anyway. It's a hardback book, it's not a big one. There's the front page, there's the spine, and then you can see there's a bit of blurb on the back. It's a substantial work in its own right. It's a hardback and it runs to something approaching under 300 pages, basically 270, something like that, with all the additions at the front. The index at the back is by paragraph numbering. It's very much the house style of Bloomsbury Law. All references are to paragraph numbers, it says at the back in the index. Then after the index you've actually got, you can see the end of the text there. You can get some idea, there's a paragraph numbering. You can see running all the way through how it's actually structured. We go to the front of the book. There's the actual main front page there, which you can see. Then we've got, after that, a preface in July 2020 written by the authors from Brick Court Chambers in London, and it's important. They say when we learn the common law of warranties and fraud, we begin with the old cases and examples which, as often as not, involve the sale of a horse. So the history there comes into it. Horse sales are a fertile source of warranty and fraud issues because of two factors, and it talks about the factors in detail. Can I just say that from horses we move to motor vehicles, but it's interesting to see how they started, because if you think back to your early days looking at contract law, an awful lot of the contracts were about that sort of area. There's a dedication which I always like to show, because a lot of work goes into these books. We only review books that we think are important books, and this is an important one. There's the structure of the book there, with various section headings for the contents. There are a total of 11 chapters, and professionals, the last chapter is on litigation issues, which I think is quite important because it deals specifically with what is required when you're pleading a claim. Then you've got the tables of cases, and after that you've got some statutory instruments. I think before that you've probably got some statutes. Yes, there we go. And then then we go straight into chapter 1, introduction. Why this book explains a case should be made that there are no specialised fields of English private civil law apart from the traditional broad divisions into common law and equitable origins. And that's their starting point. But of course, since then, we've had quite a lot of other things that have come in, mainly statute. There we go. You can see again the structure with the paragraph numbering all the way through. It's not the easiest book. I have to be blunt. So it's not the easiest book to read, and therefore it's not really for beginners. But it has got a great deal in it, which I think will be of use to people who are doing quite a large number of cases and accepting instructions in quite a lot of cases in this particular area. So what we say is that fraud, the very word, sets the teeth on edge. By its very nature, it involves dishonesty, double dealing, broken promises, deliberate deceit, and it poses special problems for lawyers charged with advising clients on any aspect of it. That's why the last chapter, I think, is helpful. It's difficult to prove, difficult to disprove, and in all too many cases difficult to prosecute or defend, because it's really an area on its own, and it of course comes back from the very roots of the English legal system, which is of course common law and equity. So it's small wonder then that it's been referred to as a tricky area of law, which is all the more reason why lawyers having to deal with it should have to be able to read a book of this calibre. And this new sort of legal text has been published recently by Bloomsbury Professional Law, as they are called. Now, while instances of fraud can pop up almost anywhere, this book focuses primarily on the business sector, namely fraudulent misrepresentation in the sale of businesses, an ever-expanding area of concern. Business cases, say the three expert authors, now occupy a distinct subdivision of the fields of contract, tort and equitable wrongs, and there are enough of them that practitioners may benefit from a specialist digest. That's really what you've got here. Now, as the three barristers are practicing barristers from Brick Court Chambers in London, they've expressed the hope that the book will assist by describing the relevant corner of the field in sufficient detail to enable a practitioner to identify which paths are well trodden and which require fresh navigational consideration. And I think that's important, because when you look at misrepresentation and you think back to things like chitty on contract and so forth, you've certainly got a lot of information in the standard works, but I think this is the gloss and if you like, the cream on the top, because it's analytical and precise, and it's a book which covers all the pertinent aspects of this subject over the 11 chapters it covers, from warranties and indemnities generally through to damages, sellers' claims, litigation issues, and of course much more. There's a quote as well: "What are the remedies for fraud and breach of warranty, and how are damages calculated?" This is only one of a number of key questions posed in this useful text, and of course it starts off, as you've heard me say, with why this book. On a cautionary note, we are reminded here that the vast bulk of business sales concern allegations of misrepresentation, often fraudulent, as well as breaches of warranty, which is even more commonplace. I don't like to suggest it too strongly, but it happens very regularly, and most people have to just basically lump it. A few people don't like it, but generally speaking, it's difficult. Busy and beleaguered practitioners, we think, will therefore appreciate this particular book because it's straightforward, it's very easy to navigate, and there are a very useful table of contents at the front, the extensive paragraph numbered index at the back, plus the numbered paragraphs throughout the book, and as you will expect, you get the very useful cases, statutes and statutory instruments. And let me conclude by saying this, that it's targeted also to arbitrators, to in-house counsel and contract drafters, as well as commercial lawyers in the more general sense. And therefore I think the book is very useful, if not essential, as an addition to your well-stocked practitioner library, either in your firm or at your set of chambers. The date of publication is cited as at 2020. I received this book, I think, a few weeks ago, and I'm recording it in the autumn of 2020. Let's just have one last look at it. There's the front again, there's the spine, and then there's the back. Just opening it in the middle, we're looking here at, let's have a look, deceit. I think that's quite an important area, because misrepresentation, this is chapter 7, misrepresentation and fraud do very much come together. They are difficult, I think, for students to understand, and I think students will find this book very helpful. Can I point out just here that if you can see it, the actual footnoting is actually in the body of the text. So you've got the numbers for the footnotes, and then you'll find them under each of the paragraphs. I know that's a little bit confusing, but in fact when it looks at the law relating to deceit, as it was then called, you can see again how the structure goes with the cases and the footnoting. But it's altogether a very important book, and one that I believe, if you are involved, to say, on a regular basis, this is a book that you will need. It's also quite useful if you see a client in conference and you are aware that this is going to be raised. You might, if you've got some idea beforehand of what you're going to need to advise upon, I think you'll find this book of some help. So thank you to the authors and to Bloomsbury Professional Law for, I think, what is a very, very good book. Thank you. Bye-bye.